without any further ado, let's cue the music and start that word chat.
Hey everybody, welcome in. It's great to see everybody. We're just back from the ACES conference in Atlanta, Georgia. And that was, some of you were there, some of you said hello. Heather was there. Heather is the outgoing president of ACES. Sarani was there, our assistant producer. It was just a wonderful opportunity to sort of just pick apart language and meet with a bunch of people who enjoy words as much as we do. Um, Heather, let me ask, what was a highlight for you?
Oh my gosh. I have to say I really loved our Chicago Manual style quiz show.
That was
Um,
fun.
yes. Jenny
That was fun.
Ringwald and with our AP support with Holly Newvine. I loved it. And it's just a ton of fun.
Yeah, and then the big announcement from AP was from the Associated Press Style Book is that they're decided to close up uh, um, uh, healthcare,
Oh,
um, make it one word instead of two. I had a little bit of a groan, I'm a little bit of a traditionalist, and I wasn't sure I was ready for it, but after thinking about it, it settled in, and it seemed like a good move. And today, we've got Lane Greene, who is in charge of the style book at The Economist. So I guess we could start out asking him about healthcare as one word. But Lane spent some time in Georgia. He grew up in Georgia. He spent some time in Atlanta, and born in Tennessee. Now coming to us from Madrid. So thank you for staying up so late. But Lane Greene from The Economist, welcome.
great. It's great to be here. Thank you so much. I actually have a thought on healthcare.
I'll bet you do.
Yeah, it's not something I've thought a lot about, but I have a colleague who has been bugging me to close it up for a while. I haven't done it yet. So I don't know if it's clear that I'm kind of the guy who makes these calls mostly in-house for The Economist where I work. And Ken's point, my colleague's point was that healthcare is not just it's not just a matter of spacing. It's that a word, when it becomes a compound, it takes on a kind of different meaning. It's not necessarily
Yeah.
meaningful based on the composition of the composition of its parts. And so you close things up as they take on a specialized meaning, like a dark room is different from a dark room, and a blackboard is different from a blackboard, classically. And his point is that American healthcare, in particular, is not particularly about the care of health. It's a big business. It's about lots of other things. When we talk about healthcare, we're talking about lots of other elements of the universe besides the
Hmm.
actual caring of health. And so he made a pretty linguistically informed argument, even though it was kind of not one he articulated in exactly that way, but I think he's kind of right about it. So I might be closing that up one day.
That's an excellent point of view that I hadn't actually considered elsewhere. I know that people talk about mental health care and say if you close it up, then it becomes mental health care, and it's really the mental should be modifying the health, and so that's problematic. So that's, I guess, a reason not to do it, but that's also a very good reason to do it. That it's not, when we talk about healthcare, we talk about more than just the actual care. So,
Yeah.
I'm curious about and don't be afraid to go down these rabbit holes of little nuance in style guides. I'm really curious about the Economist style guide. It's a thick, detailed style guide on par with New York Times or AP or Canadian Press style book, I suppose. Um, is it how would you describe it, the is it more traditional, more less likely to change, or are we going to see healthcare one word in a few weeks?
Well, I think I describe it in two ways. And one is that I think probably more than other style guides, more than something like APs, there's a long sort of philosophical section of style guide. This is sort of a style guide in two senses. One is about sort of writing style in the sort of broader sense of writing well, writing effectively and impactfully and so forth. And then the other half of it is really the stuff that copy editors think about, which is consistency, accuracy, spelling, punctuation, and so forth. The guide came down to me. I'm its sort of third keeper. First edition came out in the early 1980s under our then foreign editor, Johnny Grimmond. The second went through the hands of our obituaries editor, Anne Rowe, who's an amazing writer herself. And she then passed it on to me. And when I got it, I wrote five new chapters that introduced the style book, which are all about how to write well, how to think about vocabulary, grammar, sentence structure. There's a chapter on writing with numbers and a chapter on editing. So they introduce kind of how to think about writing. And then I call the back half stuff the little stuff, small stuff that you should sweat, but the stuff that you look up versus the stuff you sit down and read. So about half the book is to be read, about half of it is to be looked up.
Hmm.
I'd say we probably are more conservative than some of the style guides. It's a 180 something year old, 183-year-old publication.
Okay.
When I joined it, very heavily sort of British upper, but upper class or upper middle class, public school, that is to say, private school educated, white male British people with sensibilities, with a sense of gravity somewhere in about the 1960s and 70s, maybe. So resistance to Americanisms is part of the DNA, and kind of not rushing to adopt every change right away, but waiting and seeing if it beds into the language, which isn't to say it's hoary and it's super old-fashioned and prescriptivist, and I think I've made it probably less so still, but probably a little slower to update than some others might be.
Hmm. Yeah, and I understand that half the is it true half the circulation of the Economist is in the U.S. is in
Yeah, a bit
North
more than.
America.
And people might wonder why that doesn't make us more American, but the thing is, I think our Britishness is kind of a selling point in the States. First of all,
Right.
it reads differently. The prose, I mean, you could read five sentences and you'd know something was in The Economist versus the New York Times, or maybe three sentences. I think the point of view is different. The point of view on American business and especially on politics is sort of outside in. So it's got a bit of a distance on some of the hot button topics, although that's harder to maintain these days. We're more American on staff than we used to be. When I joined, we were a few. Now we're a good chunk. But it's still a British institution, and I think that differentiates us a bit in a crowded market of journalism.
Hmm. Well, I think of you as long as I've known you, it's been in relationship to linguistics and language, and probably going back to Twitter, I assume. Um, but I mean, your background is not linguistics.
Mm.
It's not, especially not even journalism. So I came into journalism from an interest in sort of community and communication and so not necessarily writing, but not a untraditional way of coming into journalism. And your background, you went to Tulane and studied. Um, you didn't study journalism. It was I got
International relations
international
ministry.
relations.
Yeah.
Thank you,
Yeah.
thank you for bailing me out there. I just drew a blank. And then you went to Oxford and got your master's there. How was it? Was journalism something you had sort of been moving toward, or did that sort of come out of the blue?
I'd say kind of the other way around. It was really a process of elimination. And I had a lot of kind of public sector careers in mind. I think the first thing I wanted to do was join the Navy. I watched Top Gun too many times, like a lot of kids my age, and was obsessed with being at least, if not in a fighter jet, at least in one of those cool white dress uniforms on a ship in foreign climes and doing things and defending our country and so forth. And then I sort of changed gears about senior year of high school. I got into the Naval Academy actually, and then I decided not to go, which was a bit of
Hmm,
a heartbreak for my father, who was also a Navy man.
sure.
And I went to Tulane thinking I would be a diplomat, and so I really studied international relations in part because I really like learning foreign languages, and I wanted to kind of combine politics and public service with this side thing I had, which is that I really just enjoyed learning foreign languages. I did Spanish in high school and studied German in college, and then Portuguese, and then Russian, and then French, and so I put that together into international relations, which is essentially political science, but with a focus.
Hmm.
And from there, master's in European politics with a regional focus, so taking that and narrowing a little further still. But all this was going on, and I thought maybe public service, State Department. I decided not to do that. I did an internship at the State Department. It was a great experience, but it showed me the career up close and wasn't quite what I wanted to do because I realized I don't think I would have been very good at implementing policies I didn't agree with. And the
Mm,
diplomats I was working for and with had to speak up for policy they knew was probably a bad idea, and they had to go defend it anyway. That's public service. It's tough. I admire people who do it, but I thought I'd be bad at it. So journalism was kind of the last option after thinking about maybe being a political scientist and academic. And then finally, I wanted to write serious stuff, maybe for a broader audience. And so, whittling one thing away after another, journalism was kind of what was left, and it's been very good to me. And The Economist has been a great intellectual home. It's a place where you can write about serious stuff, but you can write about it in an accessible way, in a way that maybe a political scientist doesn't get a chance to do as often. So I've
mhm.
been happy there, and it's been 25 years, unbelievably, but I've basically been at the same employer for my entire career.
Yeah. But in your first book on language was 2011, and you've done uh, other business, law, politics. You've done a gamut of reporting traditional journalism stuff. How did the linguistic focus come about?
So, as I say, I sort of came with languages. I was a foreign language learner, and I was known for it, and I enjoyed it. And sometime in about 2003, I wandered into City Lights Bookstore in San Francisco, a famous shop some of you might have been to. And I picked up, I wandered to a section which was this linguistics section. I didn't know what linguistics was, but there was a book that looked pretty interesting by a guy called John McWhorter and another one by a guy called Steven Pinker. And I thought, well, those look good. I'll grab those. And so I picked up The Language Instinct and The Power of Babel. And I think those two books just revolutionized my life. I just like, could not read them fast enough. I couldn't reread them fast enough. I couldn't wait to read their other books. I couldn't wait to see who else wrote things like this. And I just fell in love head over heels with language linguistics, the sort of science and the underlying stuff you knew but you didn't know. Linguistics is about
Mm,
finding out the what's in the equipment of language that people use effortlessly, but have almost no conscious knowledge of. I don't know why, but I totally fell in love, and so that's how I started pitching the first few things I wrote for The Economist on the topic. I can't remember. I think the very first thing might have been a review of a book about dying languages. And I became known for that in-house, doing more and more of it. And when it came to the sort of audaciousness of pitching your first book, especially in a career in a field you weren't trained in linguistics, I thought, well, I am trained in political science. So that first book called You Are What You Speak is really about the identity politics of language. It's about how a lot of our language ideology comes from the idea of a single language for a single state, essentially language nationalism. So I give the example of France, the idea that there should be a
mhm.
country called France that has a single version of a single language called French for all the people, no other languages, thank you very much, and that's the Platonic ideal of a country, of a society, and that norms of things like correctness and prescriptivism flow from that. That to be a good Frenchman is to speak it with correct grammar, with the correct accent, using the vocabulary correctly, and so on. So it was introducing a lot of concepts that I picked up from sort of sociolinguistics, but within this framework of nationalism, which I knew well from all the political science I'd done. So that's how I managed to edge my way into sort of respectability as a language writer, despite not having come up through it, because I read everything I could get my hands on for a solid 10 years before starting on that. And once I'd done that, I was kind of in a position to say something I think hopefully distinctive, given that most linguists don't focus on things like nationalism and national politics.
Hmm. And you got John McWhorter to write the intro to your
Yeah, I like to
first
say
book. That's
I stalk the people I admire until I make them friends. And I'm happy to say that about John and many other linguists I admire so much.
so I'm curious. So I've been I just said we haven't done I haven't done the show in 2 months. Heather was our host last month. We had Corey Stamper. She's got her new book out, and I was in the audience, which is great. And if you want to watch that, that's go to our website and YouTube, and we have our interview with Corey up there. Heather's interview with Corey, which is terrific. And but I'm struck by this. I'm sort of focused now, or thinking a lot about this fact that I was in Italy for a month. I don't speak Italian. I didn't get really an immersion into the language because it's Florence and there's a lot of tourists, and it wasn't necessary for me to force myself to learn a whole lot. But I am curious about, and here's maybe a big philosophical or scientific question, cultural question. I don't know. And that is how much is you live in Spain. You're familiar with much of Europe, and um, how much does the culture of an area influence the language? How much does the language influence the culture?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's a huge question, of course. But I can tell you, someone who's moved to a country that I didn't know very well when I came here, the answer is a lot. You realize that there are just a lot of there are a lot of mental habits encoded in language. I think everybody knows that. The this sort of folk Worfian idea is that that these are hard categories and they're hard coded and they even affect how you can think about things. Most people are not strong Worfians today and believe that language may influence your thinking or nudge it this way and that, but it doesn't strongly affect it. But I think I put it another way, which is to say that when I came to Spain, I realized how much of learning the Spanish of Spain was learning Spanish society. The categories they slice and dice things in. My wife and I were wondering why they call certain beans alubias and other ones are called judías, and they're in different parts of the store. To me, they're all beans. To the Spaniard, there's got to be some distinction there. I'm not getting. And by the way, they put black beans in the sort of Mexican section without away from all the other pulses of beans. They're not with the chickpeas. They're not with the white beans and the kidney beans, the pinto beans. They're not a Spanish bean. They're not commonly eaten, and so they get a little ghetto. And so that's like a metaphor for how
Yeah.
the way a country organizes its supermarket tells you a lot about what they value. In my wife's country, my wife is Danish, and there's they eat a lot of open faced sandwiches, a piece of bread with stuff on it, but not a second piece of bread, common for lunch. And there's a section in the supermarket that says poleg, and that is lay on or things you put on bread. Poleg is it can be pâtés, it can be cheese, it can be slices of ham, it can be slices of turkey, anything that you can put on a sandwich. It can be thin little slices of radish. They all are a category that is meaningful to Danes. So you can learn the word poleg in a dictionary and say, oh, it means stuff you put on something else. But to know the language is also to know that Danes eat lots of stuff on bread, open-faced sandwiches with a knife and fork, and that poleg is a meaningful category to Danes. And I've got jillions of examples like this from politics, from bureaucracy to you name it. I could give you lots more if you want one or two.
Well, yeah, well, and maybe another book, or maybe that's in your previous book somewhat. John McWhorter has written a lot about that,
Yep.
the differences in language. It's a fascinating thing. But yeah, I was just struck. I mean, it's funny how coming back after a month away, how I feel a little bit out of place, because you get used to the whole Italianness, and like I said, not the language so much, but just the culture and
Mm.
the ideas, and um, it's a little bit of a change, which I imagine as a journalist is that's helpful to you to be able to experience the cultures of Europe and not just be in London with the other
Yeah.
London-based.
When journalists, I mean, I have all respect for journalists who go to new and difficult places and report from them, and they often work with local journalists as a fixer or something like that to serve as translator, guide, solver of problems. But when I talk about this, I sometimes say, and with no disrespect to any of my colleagues, imagine reporting on the United States without speaking English. Imagine the best fixer in the world who's
Yeah.
explaining to you
Hmm.
whether it's how a Waffle House works and how you order, or what you should say to the police if they pull you over, or you name it. But imagine trying to get a full view of the United States and explain it accurately to your readers back in Uzbekistan or wherever you come from if you had no ability to speak English. It'd be really hard, even if you had a great translator, you had Google Translate on all the time, you were really diligent, worked very hard. It's the stuff you absorb as much as the stuff you seek out, the stuff that hits you unbidden as much as the questions you intend to ask. And there's not much substitute for that. So that's why I'm lucky to be one of the people still sent abroad by a publication for a few years to really get to know a place, to learn the language, to improve the language. And in my case, I came with Spanish, but I learned a vast amount since then.
Hmm.
And it's a real privilege. I hope that it continues because newsrooms are being cut, and foreign coverage is one of the things that has been cut in various newsrooms.
All right. Well, and that's, of course, that's the story in the United States is the shrinking of the news landscape.
Mm.
Many newspapers we thought were, sort of institutions are struggling to stay alive or are not staying alive. And the Economist calls itself a newspaper. It's
Hmm.
famously, it's a tradition. It's
Yeah.
really a news magazine, but it's weekly. So,
Mm.
how has the Economist fared in this new economy?
Well, we've had a loyal subscriber base, and so I won't bore you with the sort of last 25 years of the business of journalism, but in very short form, first of all, everything went free, and we briefly experimented with some free, but we never went fully free. And then everything became kind of a blog for a while. And then the companies like Google and Meta basically ate the advertising business that used to be the source of profit for most publications.
Mhm.
We've made it through that tunnel of challenges by never giving the whole shop away and by trying to do the best thing we can do, which is create a product people are willing to pay for. Economist is not super cheap. But what we hope to do is when the advertising disappeared, we were able to push through some price rises to keep our independence, to not depend on advertisers, to not be bought up by a bigger publishing company, and to keep giving people a good product for what they pay us. And so we've actually grown in our subscriber base, and we've grown our revenue, and we've been able to open bureaus when people are closing them. We added a bureau in Mumbai, we added a couple in China. We have not had the same hard times that others have had. And every day, every year is a challenge, and every year the editor says this is going to be tough, and it is. But we've done pretty well. So I'm happy to say right now we're still in business.
Mhm. And it's I have to say it's annoying going to the Economist and wanting to read something and then seeing the prices of it and
Yeah.
thinking, I guess I can live without that. Um, but that's as you say, so many newspapers have given that away
Yeah.
to their detriment. Um,
Well, I couldn't give my books away for free. I couldn't. Yeah, for those of us, all of us who have high-end skills, you couldn't do what you do, for free either. So I believe me, I understand. I hit pay barriers all the time myself. I
mhm,
have various ways of calling people. I have friends in lots of countries who might be able to have a subscription and send me things, and so
mhm.
I'm often
I can
able to do
remember
that.
reading the Johnson column.
Mhm.
Was that not behind the paywall or was there a test?
No, it was behind paywall like everything else, but it was you had a we have had different systems of free. So we had 4 or 5 free articles a month, and maybe it's now one free before you have to register, and then you get a couple. But I'm not exactly sure what the free
Yeah,
allocation is
yeah,
at the
that
moment.
was probably it. That's all I really needed to go to the Economist for. The thing I needed was that language column. How long ago was
Well,
Johnson a
so
language
it had a good long run, I have to say, as a columnist. Columns have a sort of sell by date sometimes. But I did it from 2011, 11 to 13, it was a blog, and 13 to 15, it was a weekly web column, and then in 16, it became a bi-weekly print column. But that meant hundreds of columns. So, uh, finding hundreds of different things to say while also doing other jobs, it gets difficult after a while. So I
column?
still do lots of language writing. I still do lots of reported pieces and book reviews and other things like that. And sometimes even just kind of a take on something that's sort of column-like, as Johnson, although the name has been semi-retired for now.
Yeah, yeah. Well, the name, I think when it first came out, and it was announced the name was Johnson. The people were thrilled because of the double meaning, because of the British slang, but of course it's Johnson, the lexicographer, that is honored there. Or I assume that's the.
Yeah, that's right. And a lot of people don't know that there was a Johnson column in the 90s. When I discovered The Economist, I was at Oxford
Oh,
for my master's, and for about 4 years, there was an odd little, very short column. It was usually about half a page or a little less. So it was shorter than mine, by a guy called Stephen Hugh Jones, who was an editor for us for a very long time, and had this just odd magpie language interest. Sometimes grammar, sometimes Jamaican patois, whatever took his interest that week. And it was very much him, and it was closed down when he retired around then, and I revived the name. So some people who've been reading The Economist for a long time, like I was in the 90s, might remember the old Johnson. So I was technically
hmm.
the second Johnson.
Oh, okay. All right. I want to. We have a question to get to. We'll get to that in a minute. We have well since the since you've stopped doing the column now. but you are doing some TikTok videos, some short form videos that are quite fun. And we'll like to show a few of those. And I like to start with one on the Southern accent. So your accent does not sound Southern to me. It sounds very, broadcast, typical
Mm.
American, what I would say, maybe
Mm.
similar to mine. I don't know. Maybe you're hearing more Michigan, Midwest in mine. But you've written about hearing your father on
Mm.
the phone after you were at Oxford, thinking, why did his accent get so much stronger? So have you lost your accent? And if you go back, do you find yourself
Yeah, like a lot of
beginning
people, I'm
that?
a little bit of a natural kind of accent comedian, chameleon, although I don't think too much, but I definitely have a natural southernness to my accent when I'm with my family. If I
Mm,
think about it, if a subject comes up that reminds me of home or childhood or my aunts and uncles sitting around the table telling stories, it will naturally, just the vowels will lengthen and there's just those things will happen without thinking about it. I think it happens to a lot of people I know. Indian colleagues who, when they call home, their accent is much more Indian on the phone with mom
mm,
than it is in
mm,
the office. So I think it's not uncommon, but I never had a strong version of it. My mom is from Wisconsin, and my dad's from Atlanta. And if we watch or from Macon, Georgia, actually, a couple hours south. And if we watch the video, you'll see the phenomenon I'm talking about, which is that Atlanta was attracting a lot of people to the suburbs where I grew up. So not a lot of my friends were kind of true blue Southerners. So maybe we can watch the video because that will put it all in context, and then we
yeah,
can
yeah.
jump off from there.
Let's take a look at that.
Are Americans losing the Southern accents? The Southern drawl is the most emblematic American voice. Many people imitating a stereotypical American will often adopt a twangy Southern accent. But a recent study found that this unique part of America's linguistic culture may be under threat. A crucial part of the famous drawl is the Southern vowel shift. In the South, the tongue is raised, making vowels higher, as in dress, dress, trap, trap. The vowel in kit is not only raised, but it becomes a diphthong, or two vowels back to back. Kit. One study in Georgia found that the Southern accent is most common among baby boomers. They were born in the South before the influx of migrants began from the North in the 1960s. In the next generation, the prevalence of Southern sounds declines, when kids like me from the South went to school with kids from northern cities like Boston or Philadelphia. And finally, even younger Southerners, millennials in Generation Z, sound the least Southern of all. In fact, their vowels are heading in the opposite direction, reflecting a wider change happening across America. These speakers tend to pronounce caught and cot as homophones. Caught, caught. And the vowels in kit, dress, and trap are moving lower towards kit, dress, trap. But this linguistic change is less about loss and more about evolution.
The good old Southern accent you hear today is not as old as many people think.
Speakers born around 1900 almost entirely lack the Southern vowel shift.
Monday, the first day of the week. Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday.
This speaker, born in 1894, does have a distinctive Southern accent, but it's quite different from that of a 70-year-old Georgian today. Like anything in language, the iconic Southern accent is unlikely to be eternal, but fortunately, it's also not going to disappear entirely anytime soon. A gentle shift in the Southern accent can be taken as a sign of how popular the South has become, as many Americans discover its charms and flock to the region.
Okay, interesting. Um, so it's great to see on these. The best part, of course, is seeing your face on the various, little cartoons, and so I have a question about that. We'll get to the accent question later, but what was that like? Is this something that you read and then, or you're videotaped, or you video recorded, and then you go in and see this for the first time, what they've done with you, or is there like a storyboarding process?
There's a couple of steps, but most of these are based on a column. So they'll take something I've written in the past and say, this is, evergreen and we'll make a nice video. If somebody writes a script, which is, it takes the 750 words of the column and sometimes boils it down to about what feels like about 150. And it was often very painful to see it simplified quite so
Sure.
much. And of course, my 750 is a simplification of a vast subject usually anyway. Um, then it's blocked out with images that are kind of planned for each bit that I read out, and I'm in front of a green screen. So I'm in our Economist studios. We built new studios about 2 years ago. Stand in front of a big flat roll of green paper, and they'll tell me to interact with a globe in my hand or look around as you saw me doing in the car. They
Hmm.
take shots from the side and so on. So I'm interacting with nothing. It's just a piece of green paper. But they have planned out what the visuals are likely to be. And then they have angles and different cameras so that they have all the shots they need. And usually, once I get a cut of it, I'm as surprised as you all were just now seeing it pretty much for the first time, even though I have a rough idea of where it's going. The specific animations are very clever and very funny and very good. And
Hmm.
there's a young woman called Amelia Howell Jones who's just an unbelievably great animator of these things. She's our superstar on these videos, and all credit to her and to the whole films team who are game for trying this, for taking this quirky subject already and then giving it this very very distinctive style. To Amelia's skills and to the whole team for being game for it. So it's been a great time doing them. I really enjoy it.
And you're doing more? Is this an
Yeah, it's
ongoing thing?
ongoing. I'll be going back to London the next couple of months. We usually try to do about 3 or 4 on a day, and they take such a long time to produce that they can't release more than about one a month, just given their constraints in mind. Because the films team has quite a lot of work to do, a lot of news to
Yeah.
keep up with. Yeah.
Yeah. I do think it's fun that it's it doesn't look fake. Clearly your head doesn't belong on where they put it, but it always looks like it could almost fit.
Yeah, yeah.
Uh, but I am curious about the accent. So I think when my parents are both born in England, north of London, and I noticed when I was young that my relatives over there spoke a little bit less um, proper English, and I kind of wondered if my parents coming over sort of smoothed that out and offered the British, the BBC English that people would respect and would hope for. And I wonder how much is that. Let me throw another thing out. When we were in Galway, um, Ireland, a couple of years ago, and we were in Dublin, we were in Galway, and we noticed we were in a shop, and there was somebody I was convinced was an American with an Irish accent
Mm.
who was serving us. And then I heard it again, and I happened to be with Stan Carey, who writes about linguistics, and I asked him about this, and he said this is a phenomenon among young people that they're watching Friends on TV and they're
Mm. Mm.
emulating that American
Yeah,
accent. So
yeah,
they're doing the code shift thing. And
yeah.
so how much is a Southern accent? I mean, when you go over to Oxford, um, is there some negativism about the Southern accent and a bit and a desire to sort of avoid that?
I mean, a little bit. I mean, Oxford is Oxford, and you'll hear lots of stories within Britain of people coming from the north of England and Scotland and other
Yeah.
places, in particular, north of England is probably the canonical example, coming down and losing their accent, which is to say, acquiring the accent of the South and of the ruling class, RP, or kind of Southern Standard British English. So yeah, if you came over with a heavy Mississippi accent or something, you would certainly get a lot of commentary on it. Now, if
Mm,
you've fought your way into Oxford one way or another, usually you come with some maybe credibility, but there's classism and snobbery everywhere, and Oxford is definitely not an exception to that rule.
yeah.
And so I think it's harder for Brits, whereas for Americans, if you did have a Southern accent, they'd probably treat it more like a curiosity, and you'd get lots of comments on it. I had people tell me I sounded more Southern than I think I sound. Although it comes out sometimes. My wife likes to say when I'm angry, when I've had a few drinks or under certain circumstances like that, if I'm maybe puffing out my chest and mad about something. So it definitely does leak out sometimes, and maybe that's what people were hearing. It's a bit of a curiosity because maybe a lot of the people who come to places like Oxford don't typically have strong Southern accents. So you should be prepared for questions at the very least.
Right. Is that universal among the languages that you're familiar with?
I mean, is it universal? I know nobody knows everything about all the 7,000 languages of the world, so it's hard to say for sure. But some measure of trying to distinguish us from them is probably universal in human psychology, and it certainly core to a lot of how people think about the sociology of language and sociolinguistics. So yeah, every language I've looked at has a way of just a prestigious accent, grammatical rules that are obeyed by the people who are powerful and who matter, and so forth. That was really the topic of that first book of mine, You Are What You Speak, is this idea that when we talk about language and people are standing on correctness or clarity or what they think is correctness and clarity, they're really talking about prestige, power, sometimes economic status, and so forth. And that it's a language is often a proxy for those things. And I think that's probably true it's certainly probably true in every industrialized society in the world, and every Western society and societies like them. Whether it's true of every language of Papua New Guinea, I couldn't tell you for sure.
Yeah, it's interesting. So I love talking about linguistics. We're a lot of editors in the room, a lot of
Mhm.
word lovers, but a lot of people come from a background in editing like I do, and so we do have some interest in the style guide aspect of what you do, and we have a question in the room related to that, I
We
believe, don't we, Heather?
do. Yes, that comes from Aaron. Do you want to unmute and ask?
Sure. Lane, I'm really interested in how you approached updating the style guide.
Mm.
I looked at the previous one. I think I reviewed it for copyediting.com at the time. So, how do you know when it's time?
Mm.
What did you have a specific approach to how you did it? Was there anything in particular you wanted to tackle? I just would like to
Mm.
hear more about your process.
No, thanks. I have a joke, which is that I'm sort of like the Pope, which is in theory infallible and the final decision maker on matters of doctrine, but in practice, someone who has to deal with a lot of bullshit cardinals who have their own ideas of things, and an institution, and the integrity and the continuity and the history of that institution to take into account when making any changes. So even the most liberal-minded Pope is not going to show up on day one and say, out with this, out with that, out with the other thing. And so I try to use what authority I have carefully. So process-wise, I really just took an old copy of the guide, the last edition before mine, and I started just kind of marking up every rule that I thought it needed changing, and it was quite a few. And I can give you some categories. Some rules were stated more categorically than they could really bear as weight. So it would say X does not mean Y. And then you could just open up 4 or 5 dictionaries and find that three of them or four of them or all of them have Y as a second meaning, or maybe even the first meaning by now. Some of these are quite old-fashioned. We'd say that to garner means to store, not to gather. Well, that was true a long time ago, but it no longer means only to store. And almost nobody uses the word garner that way. And so if I let a rule like that stand, I would say do not use garner to mean gather or something like that. We soften the wording of the rule so that we're not pinning ourselves to an empirical claim that doesn't bear scrutiny. In some cases, I just threw a rule out. It was old, or it was either not right when it was written, or times have changed, and both are true of many rules. There are hoary shibboleths that run around journalistic style guides that needed trimming, and I trimmed a few of those. There are cases where the language has moved on, and I updated such rules, and there are a small few, where I really did kind of, I think, modernize the kind of the ethic of it. For example, with things like singular they, which I know has made a splash at ACES in the past, and other rules like that. That's probably the clearest one where I made the change. I just kind of put my foot down and said, "Folks, this has been in the Oxford English Dictionary citations from 1375. This is not a product of radical 1970s feminism, unless Chaucer was a radical 1970s feminist." So I pushed that through. The split infinitive, that rule never bore its weight, and as you all will know. And so I pushed that through, and over some opposition, I said, look, if you don't like split infinitives, don't split them. Do whatever you like. What you may not do, and this is in the guide, is that you may not just move the modifier one word over and resulting in some horrible mangled sentence where the modifier now looks like it's modifying the wrong thing, the rhythm is ruined, and no English person would say, no English speaker would say it like that. So I'm proud of some of the things I pushed through like that. There's a couple of big ones like singular they and split infinitive, where I dragged us into the 20th century just as the 21st was getting going.
There is some, there's a small style guide that's mostly AP style that I'm the potentate over myself, and sometimes, when the questions come up, they're questions. The reason they're questions is because there's often a change in common usage over a particular word. Like one that comes to mind is hotspot. Hotspot is two words in the dictionary.
Mhm.
Very, very common now that it's one word, Wi-Fi
Yeah.
hotspot. Um, but I feel sometimes it's lonely at the top being the person who makes those decisions. Is it difficult or is there a process by which you consult with people, and
Yeah.
what is the process?
I mean, people come to me all the time. So my colleagues write me and say, "Can we please so and so?" And I find it hard to say no, but I probably say no about 2/3 of the time because they're sort of personal bugbears, and it's a word they don't like, and they want us to ban it. The Economist is probably, first of all, I don't like banning things, and second, the ban list was getting quite long. The principles of the style book in our journalism are, be clear, be accurate. Don't use the language of bureaucrats, of politicians, of lawyers, of people who have an agenda and who are trying to slip something past you, but rather try to be as frank and as straight and as clear as possible. So if you lay those principles down, then you don't have to ban every word of bureaucraties or journalese or lawyerese or whatever in the book. And we did have a long list of words that had sort of accrued over time, and they became unmemorizable, and so it became harder to apply the list. So the idea was trim the list and give people the principles of good writing, and in a positive frame too. Use this word rather than that one. Try to give them tools, not just bans or rules. I like to say tools, not rules, is my catchphrase on that. But people write me all the time. They say, "Can we please ban so and so?" And I usually say no. They say, should we write such and such closed up or hyphenated or two words? And I say, ugh, this is where I really, some people are passionate about closing things up or hyphenation. I am slightly less so, but I have to make lots of calls like that. It is a lonely job. And the other thing is capitalization. Capitalization, hyphenation, and closing up words are sort of 90, account for about 85% of the queries, 90% that I get. I'm sure that's true of a lot of you.
Yeah, yeah, I would say so. So I assume you update this regularly in an internal website?
Yeah. Well, we have an internal PDF that's a version of the book that we can add to, and I try to do it about once a quarter. But I also have expert colleagues who will say, look, Middle East colleague wrote me and said, look, we use the honorific Sayyid with somebody's name in Iran. It's an honorific, it's not part of their name. There are people called Sayyid, it's an Arabic and a Persian name. But in this case, this guy is called a Sayyid because he claims descendancy from the Prophet Muhammad. So it's not properly part of his name. We don't use this honorific. This is not something I was au fait with. So good to know. And so it's something that I'll send a memo around to colleagues, reminding them to find out, make sure that Sayyid is part of a person's name if we use it. So there's a brilliant section on foreign naming conventions. I mean, we have a section on Burmese names and a section on Cambodian names and a section on you name it. And I think that's a really interesting, distinctive bit of The Economist because we have reporters everywhere. We have experts in every country in the world. So I think if nothing else, that would earn its place on the shelf next to other style books if you have them, because it's unusual in its detailed treatment of a lot of that stuff.
Well, I always say I do still have colleagues who say, "Oh, I use this style guide," and I don't use this style guide, and I always think, why would you not use both style guides because they are giving you different information, and
Mhm.
they're made by people who are thinking, spend a lot of time thinking about this. So
Yeah.
what are there style guides that you consult in
Yeah,
particular?
you're standing in front of a bunch of them. I mean, I have Brian Garner and I have Merriam-Webster's and I have I'm a collector of style books, even by sort of conservative, prescriptivist, traditionalist writers whom I don't agree with, but I have
Hmm.
Kingsley Amis, and I have, all kinds of books like that about good usage. And sometimes I look at a question and I really want to run it to ground. So I read the entry on such and such for in every book I can find before I make my ruling and see what everybody from Garner to Merriam-Webster to all of these other books say before I come to my conclusion, because people have looked into this stuff before me. Sometimes the issues are generally hard to run down that way because they're not in most of the books I have. So I have to
Hmm.
kind of research it sort of more fundamentally myself.
Hmm. Does the Economist have a dictionary of record that they will
We
consult
unofficially
first?
use chambers as hyphenation and spelling tiebreaker. I don't know why that is, but that's the one. It's a
Yeah.
British dictionary, and I don't. That was something I inherited as a practice. So if I truly don't care, I look it up in chambers and take whatever they have.
Yeah. Let me, I promise we're going to do some videos, and I think we've only done, well, yeah, we've only done one. So let's do another of your TikTok videos because they're all fun. And if anybody has any questions, feel free to toss them in the chat and we will get to them in the, about 12 minutes left on my clock. So um, let me switch screens and let's do another TikTok video. There it is.
Have you ever found yourself at a family wedding searching for the term for your daughter's husband's parents or your wife's brother's wife? This is a particularly English language problem. Other languages pay far more attention to familial details. Let's start with marriage relations. English adds the relatively cold suffix in-law to describe a relationship through your spouse.
Ow.
Whereas French, by contrast, has a rather warmer belle or beau, meaning beautiful. So your mother-in-law is your belle-mère, or your brother-in-law is your beau-frère. Spanish goes even further, so it distinguishes your cuñado, which is your spouse's brother, from your concuñado, which is your spouse's sibling's husband. Spanish even has the term cuñadismo, or brother-in-lawism. That means talking about something you know little about, as though you were an authority. It's essentially a Spanish equivalent of the English term mansplaining. Things get even more complicated from there. Arabic, for example, accounts for which side of the family uncles and aunts come from. An am or an amma is an uncle or an aunt on your father's side, and a khal or khala is an uncle or an aunt on your mother's side. And your am's wife does not become your amma. She is zawjat amak, the wife of your uncle. Chinese makes some of the same distinctions and adds a few more. It has different words for whether your relatives are older or younger than you, and also for relatives who are older or younger than your parents. This focus on seniority probably stems from the importance Confucianism places on respecting your elders. So next time you can't remember how you're related to some distant uncle or third cousin or long-forgotten in-law, take heart. It may have less to do with your memory and more to do with the language that you speak.
All right, and I love these mostly just because, I love that one, just seeing what they did with the family portraits with the aunts and the in-laws in
I
your
like the
case.
the hanging the hanging family tree. Did a great job of explaining what I was saying because it's hard to follow it at
Mm,
full speed, maybe. But
yeah,
there's a handy graphic, and then when the Confucianism, the Chinese elder seniority thing comes in, and the way they tilt. Again, I think the team that does these are just so brilliant at those at getting some of the conceptual stuff into fun visuals that are also memorable.
yeah. Um, so so let me ask you. I've never learned another language, and I've like I said, I've studied Spanish a little bit, and which was a hindrance, of course, when I was in Italian and kept trying to speak Spanish, um, and but everything was people were speaking English, and so I was surprised when on those occasions where I was trying to interact with in some situation and there wasn't English speaker. Usually it was just a matter of somebody calls somebody else over. Um, but you started in high school, I think you said, and you
Mhm.
just um, picked up. And I have to say it's probably a um, it's probably a mental acuity that you have that I don't. But um, how do you how do you learn languages without the immersion of them? I mean, were you able to pick up those
I mean,
languages without?
I was well into four languages before I ever left the United States for the
Yeah,
first time. So yeah, I mean, definitely. I suppose it has to be some kind of ability because I enjoyed it so much, and I think that the enjoyment ability feedback loop was very strong in that I found it easy, and then I did well on tests and Spanish. Started with Spanish. And because I was doing well in it, I got praised, and that made me want to work harder. And then I worked harder, and then I was better, and then I did better still. And it just starts a virtuous cycle. And so we had to do 2 years of Spanish only, but I did four. I went off to a summer camp to learn Spanish the summer before my senior year. And so I just fell in love with it. And as soon as I got to college, all I wanted to do was use every available elective to do another language. And so that's what I did. I did French, Spanish, Portuguese, and German at college. I spent my third year abroad in Germany. I ended up spending some time working in Brazil, so I speak pretty good Portuguese, and married a Danish woman, and on and on and on. So, yes, I love it. I don't know why, but I do, and that makes me do the work, and the work produces results, and that makes me love it more. And so, I guess I'm just one of those people.
yeah. What was the most difficult language to acquire?
Yeah, Arabic by far. I mean, running away with Russian in a sort of distant second. But both very hard, but Arabic because of a lot of distinctions that English just doesn't make. It's not. It's the only non-Indo-European of the ones I've studied, and so things like having to remember that your uncle and aunt have different words depending on which side, and then that your married aunt is not doesn't get the same label as your dad's sister, things like that. So yeah, and a lot of grammatical stuff too. The fact that a masculine singular noun becomes looks like a feminine singular when it's plural for some reason, unless it's animate, in which case it does something different. Just like a lot of mind-bending rules like that, where you're like, "What? That makes no sense." You spend a really hard year getting to this part of the learning curve, and then you start to see that the curve is no longer vertical, and you can start to see that you can get there. But that took some sticking to it because it was hard.
That was my question. I've been wishing and working slightly to learn Spanish, German, and Russian are my ones I'm excited by. To hear that you speak them, I was like, oh goodness. And as you were talking, it reminded me of when I would travel to Thailand, try and learn a few Thai phrases. And I was really struck by the structure to end a phrase with a certain sound if the
Mhm.
speaker was female, if the speaker was male.
Yeah, so how are
And
they
I don't
different?
know.
Did you learn
So a
them?
woman would say ka at the end, like kapkun ka, and a male speaker would say, and I'm going to butcher the pronunciation because I think it's krap, but like cup, so like kapkun cup.
Okay.
And I didn't know if you had familiarity with that in any other language or just your thought on it, because I thought it was very interesting.
I
It
mean,
is.
yeah, I mean, Russian verbs have an ending in the past tense based on the gender of the subject, but not in the present
Oh.
tense. Why is that? I have no idea. Why only in the past? In Arabic, it's in all the both present and past tense. It has a dual, so you have to remember when you're talking about two people. It has you feminine, you masculine, and also in the plural. So you feminine mixed or male, and you feminine. Plural. So you have, I think, about 14, forms for, a verb in every tense. Fortunately, there's only a few tenses. But you have adjussive, as well as a sort of a subjunctive. So it's a bear. It's a lot of forms. The dialects are all simpler, but that's a different problem. If you learn Arabic, you essentially have to learn something like the equivalent of Latin and Italian. You have to learn Latin to read and Italian to talk to people in the street, and that itself is its own problem because you have to choose how to start, and what your strategy is, and what your goals are. If you want to go talk to people in the street, you really need to learn modern Egyptian dialect or modern Levantine. And if you want to read the newspaper and watch news broadcasts and listen to political speeches, you have to learn the classical based.
Uh, mean, I'm going to throw in the last of our three TikTok videos. How many are there? Like 17, is that right?
I lose count. Probably that sounds about right.
Yeah, about that. It depends on how you search for 'em, maybe. But about 17 videos on TikTok. You follow the Economist and Lane Greene or Lane on Language. Is this how they're labeled, or some of them?
On TikTok, they're under Lane on Languages. They're also on Instagram and other platforms, including our own. But
Mhm.
on TikTok, they have this specific group that you can go to, which is called Lane on Languages. Yeah.
Okay, we'll go in a different direction for this last one. And did I do? Yes, there it is.
Does handwriting help you learn? 2.5 millennia ago, Socrates complained that writing would harm students because they'd no longer need to memorize what they learned in class.
Today, debate is raging over different technologies: computers, phones, and AI, and the threat they pose to handwriting.
Research shows that writing by hand can be beneficial. The physical act of arranging squiggles on a page engages your visual and motor memory, helping you memorize everything from the shapes of letters to the quirks of English spelling. Handwriting may also be superior in taking notes. In a study from 2014, students who took notes with a computer wrote down about twice as many words. That suggests they weren't so much understanding as copying everything they heard. Handwriting does take longer, but it forces note takers to compress ideas into their own words, which helps with conceptual understanding. And policymakers are taking note. Sweden and England and about half of American states are pushing more handwriting instruction. Several school districts in America have gone so far as to ban laptops, though that's not necessarily good for some students with disabilities and does ignore the importance of being able to type. Being able to get ideas down quickly before they're forgotten does have its benefits. Socrates may or may not have had a point about the downside of writing, but no one would care or even remember if his student, Plato, hadn't noted it down for the benefits of posterity.
Okay, that's an interesting topic as well. But I have to ask you about the frog. What's the deal with the frog? Lane Greene is a frog.
I hadn't even thought about what the frog is doing. This. Somebody asked me about the parrot, but of course, there's usually a connection
Oh,
to the text, but you have to look for the parrots there when I'm talking about copying, and so the parrots, of course, famously
oh,
repeat things. But I'll have to look back at the frog and try to figure out.
okay. Well,
Some of it's slightly just random, and some of but
yeah.
usually there's a connection to the text. So when I get
Right.
it, when I get an answer on the frog, I'll let you know.
And you said you don't have any, there are none in the works now, but you're going to do some more when you get back to London. So probably in a few months we'll see some more of these.
Yeah, and there'll be a few in production now, so there may be a few before that as well, because
Oh,
there's,
okay.
there's a few in the
All
pipeline.
right.
Yeah.
And the last, so you did two books on language, and then well, three books, of course, but the third one was the update to the style guide with some chapters to be read on writing. Is there a cadence for updating that particular book and re-releasing it?
Um, yeah, I'm not exactly sure what the cadence would be. We do put out regular updates of it, so every few years, but I'm not exactly sure when the next one would be expected. We'd obviously want to do enough updating to make it a legitimately worth buying new edition. But I'm not
Right.
exactly sure when that'll be.
Are you working on another book project now?
Yeah, I'm actually writing a sort of short history of English, which is a departure in being mainly backward looking. But I'm finding it fascinating. I'm loving it. And the concept of the book, it's going to be called something like English in 12 Changes. And it basically walks you from sort of Beowulf to the modern era in kind of single stories that focus on a single change at a time. Usually it's done by period. So we talk about the Old English, and then we talk about the Vikings, and when they get the Norman Conquest, and then we get Chaucer, and then we get Shakespeare. It's always done in that order. I'm not doing it exactly in that order, although it's roughly chronological, but instead I look at how English lost its inflectional endings, how English got a bunch of Norse vocabulary, how English became more French, not just the vocabulary, but some elements of grammar and so on. It's gonna have the great vowel shift. It's gonna have the decline of thou as a pronoun and the rise of you, and look at social issues. So each change will take one piece of the puzzle and how we get from English of 800 AD to today.
Okay. Well, that's it. And when's that expected? Do you know?
Christmas 27th, so you know what to
Oh,
get your difficult uncle or sister or whatever for that Christmas.
perfect. Christmas next year. Maybe that's an excuse to have you back on next
All right.
year or in 2028 to talk about that, because that's certainly a subject that will resonate with this crowd. So appreciate it. Thank you very much. We're out of time, but it's been wonderful to talk to you face to face like this. Lane's been on was on our Word of the Year episode a couple of years ago, but that's it. So I feel like you're an important part of the linguistic community, and so it's great to have you here talking to us. So thank you very much.
Great. Thank you very much. Enjoyed it.
Thanks so much, everybody.
Bye.